Mr. Borghini is responsible for the overall management of Europe's rail and successor of the Shift to Rail joint undertaking. Activities since he took up the position of the Executive Director in February 2016 to 2021, and his mandate has been extended up until May 2026. And so prior to his posting, Mr. Borghini held senior management positions in different domains in private and international organisations at corporate level, and was the Deputy Executive Director of CESAR joint undertaking in Brussels, and prior to this was Director and Chief Financial Officer for the International Fund for Agricultural Development. So welcome, Mr. Borghini. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure. I'm Italian, so I like to move to be seated is quite complex for me. But good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here and to discuss about mobility that can lead a greener and energy secure future. I think the previous panel already introduced the aspect related to people, and we are going now to discuss about prosperity and planet, I think, or start to do this. And with me, we'll have some of the speakers here in the room. We have, first of all, François Davenne. I don't think François needs any introduction. He's the Director General of International Union of Railways, UAC. So François, please come. And he has a diversified background, having gained experience in different type of field in telecommunication, but also in the regulatory frameworks at international level. And he will deliver also a presentation later on. After we have Andrés de León, that I think is connected online, if I'm not mistaken. I don't see him. No, we have Andrés, and we have also Andrés Rodenbeck, the CEO of Siemens Infrastructure. Please come in. Good morning. Please take a seat. I think it's there. But we have also Andrés de León, that is the CEO of Hyperloop. Do you know if...
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Andrés. Good to hear you. Andrés is the CEO. Very well, thank you. He's the CEO of Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. He's one of the 7 promoters developing Hyperloop technologies, and he will provide a different type of perspective. Well, André already joined us, and he's the CEO of Rail Infrastructure in Siemens Mobility. So he's been in Siemens for many years now, and he has this position since April 2019. And he's also the president of the German Railway Industry Association, VDB. And after, we have with us Karen Vancluysen, that is the Secretary General of POLIS, and she also should be online. Karen, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to hear from you. We cannot see you, but I believe we can hear very well. And Karen has been appointed the Secretary General of Police in September 2014, but she has been working in urban transport activities and for all her career and new research innovation projects. And finally, we have the Rafael Schvartzman. Please, Rafael. He is the Regional Vice President Europe of the IATA, the International Air Transport Association. And he has been working in IATA since 2005 and has been working in relation with South America and take also responsibility not only for the relation with European stakeholders, but also with the Central Asia region. As you can see from the panel and the person online, we are really not talking about railway, but we are talking about integrated mobility. And why? Because effectively the topic of the full session, the event is about people, and we need to serve as railway, but also as aviation, as infrastructure, as Hyperloop in the future, and urban mobility, our clients. For what? Well, we need to have a planet that is sustainable because we know the consequences of it, and we want to have growth. And I think we are suffering for this in the last 3 years. Well, we started with COVID in 2020, and we are now in another additional new crisis that is much worse, and well, we don't know what will come. So these are the line. In a recent article I read on the New York Times, an economist, Friedman, presented the importance of the sustainability of the energy supply. We are looking always to sustainability as renewable energy compared to fossil fuel, but we never talk about sustainability of energy supply, security of energy supply, because without this type of security, we cannot ensure the transition that has been spoken before. So the panel today will not focus only on the sustainability, but we'll talk about securing the energy for the future, for a sustainable future. And we will start our session today with a presentation from François Davenne. François, please, go ahead. You want to, yeah, as you prefer. Yeah.
I can do it from here. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, no, thank you. Ah, okay. Okay, can you see the slide? Okay. Well, I choose to have a small presentation just to give some picture and some elements of context, because I think what Carlo said is actually true. What we need to do is really a systemic change. And in a systemic change, we have to see all the components, in particular securing the energy. And we can see that with what is happening today in the international situation, securing energy, securing food, securing basic needs is really something that we should think about, and it's part of the picture. And concerning railways, since I will be speaking about that, the main question is actually how we integrate indeed railways within a system. And for UIC, the International Union of Railways, we had last year, due to the initiative of Lucy Anderton, we tried to build a compelling narrative. I will not enter into what is exactly in, because that will be part of what we will be speaking about during the whole session. But what appeared as a surprise is that worldwide we had a consensus. So the big lines that I will evoke today, they are consensual in Asia, in Europe, in Middle East, in Africa. That means what I will present today is not only a European way of thinking, that's really a global way of thinking. And well, I think we have been speaking about interconnection, transforming our cities. Well, I would not say again what have been very well said in the previous panel. One of the major components, that will be how we will transform our city, well, low emission area and so on, how we will better connect communities in sparing energy. The second very important component will be energy and technology innovation. Why? Because we need to increase capacity. And with 9-for-90, as it was called in Germany, that will be real-time experimentation of, do we have actually capacity questions? And in Germany, that will be really interesting to see whether people will indeed seize the opportunity and use more the system, but does the system will be able to handle it? And I think we are speaking about having rail as a backbone, but are we really able to be the backbone, and what crucial investment needs to be done? So that's the second very important component. The other one is seamless interconnectivity. Well, it has been it has been evoked by the last panel, but that's absolutely crucial. We need to think interconnected system. Well, yesterday it was enough in a city to have a very good public transport system, and well, whether there was specificity, it was, let's say, funny. You were in London and it took you one day to understand how the Oyster card was working, or P after that. But now we really need to have a global system. We need to have interconnection. We need to speak between railways, which have also some funny specificities, and the other mode of transport. That a must, because we have to design a system that is indeed seamless for the whole community and not only for the user of the public transport system. That's one of the very important components of that. And the last one, from my point of view, is the most important, is the customer experience, how we shift expectation, how we make modal shift desirable. Because at the end of the day, what we want is to promote modal shift, how we will make it something to be desired by the customer and by the citizen. And there, I think, what is important, there are basically two words, inclusion and democracy. We need to include all the different publics, and it was very well said earlier, well, women, disabled people, how we make our system welcoming, and also how we have an involvement of our citizen into building a new paradigm. So jumping into perhaps more technical things, well, we repeatedly say that rail or public transport should be the backbone of mobility. Well, a backbone, classically, well, that's IT. Yeah? That's the core of the network, and the core of the network, it has some good capabilities. Well, if it does want to work, yes. Internally, you have to minimize internal complexity. You have to create interoperable train paths. That's for railway. You have to connect different systems. You have to ensure safety and security in our digital age. But you have also to manage external interfaces. Well, that's for us multimodality, interfacing with other regulation, creating and securing common data model. So that's a theoretical image, and that's the image that we have all in our minds. But that is really theoretical, because here we are speaking of electrons. They are easy creature to live with, actually, and the complexity is huge, but it's manageable. In the real life, that's what we, there is a delay. In the real life, what we have is this. Depending of where we are we speaking about intercity? Are we speaking about urban area? Are we speaking about medium density area? Are we speaking about low density area? In each of these configurations, what the backbone is fairly different. Between cities, it's train, perhaps aviation a little bit, sorry for that. And in urban area, then you have the whole range of public transport, metro, commuter trains, bus, tram, and also for the last mile road, cycling and so on. Well, when you are going into low density areas, then you will have car again as something that you cannot avoid. We have a road network, so we need to live with this road network, and the question of interconnection will be there very important. So there we have the complexity, and that's what we have to deal together, how we deal together this complexity, and we make it efficient. And my last slide will be about the fact that time matters. We have read the last IPCC report. We have basically 10 years to make, oops, sorry. What did I do? I don't know.
I think they changed the...
Yeah, they changed the setting? Okay, yeah. No, sorry. Okay, we have 10 years to make things evolving. And that will be quite difficult because we are entering into a non-linear environment. We know that climate change have begun, and we really don't know what climate episode we will have. So we need to act really fast. And I think the main idea that I will terminate there, is that we have to choose what projects are transformational, what project would really change the game. And well, Carlo is near to me. That's exactly what Europe's Rail is about to do, to choose the transformational projects that will allow to really change the paradigm. And that will be very important to have that in mind. And the other very important question is to make modal shift as a policy priority. Today is not really a policy priority. We need to, sorry for that, we need to do it quite rapidly. And the last one, and perhaps I would have the opportunity to come back to that, what kind of financing? Because if we do that as a clear policy priority, what kind of mechanism exists for modal shift? I don't think we really know it today. So thank you for your attention. Hope that I've not been too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, François. I think you set the scene from the rail perspective. It was not by chance that there is no a plane in the slide of François, but we will come back to you, Rafael, later on after the initial presentation. But I think, François, you pointed out some important aspects about, I would call it equity. Effectively, mobility and transport can be one of the major connecting system around the world, but it can be also one of the systems that can divide people around the world. And I think the security of energy supply and the transition will be one of the key elements of this type of transition. We will go back to this later in the discussion we'll have between ourselves. But now I would like to give the floor to Andrés Rodenbeck for his presentation. Andrés, if you would like to sit here or you want to take the podium as you prefer, the floor is yours. And if we can have the slide on the screen in front of us, will be good. Thank you. It's easier for the speakers, I think.
No, thanks. It's a great opportunity to be here, and so happy to see so many faces. In reality, I think you talked about 2D and 3D, right? So it's really great to have this all in 3D. So thanks for having me here. I will follow you, François, and presenting from here. And I think what you said rightfully is, what are the projects that are transformational? And that is something I want to talk about today. I will come with some facts and figures. We're a company of engineers, so I like facts and figures. And I will give me the... Yes. I will start with what we had also... There are no slides?
We can have the slides maybe on the screen also for in front of us, please.
Also there are no slides?
Yeah, no, we are... adjusting I see the colleagues are adjusting the settings,
Okay, but while you're searching, maybe I just do some introductory words about the goals and challenges that were also
the slides are there.
Mentioned this morning. It's not working.
There is a slide delay. It's working, huh?
It doesn't move, effectively.
It doesn't move.
It doesn't move.
The colleague, if you can check, because he doesn't...
Now we are there.
Okay.
So I think we all know these factors, these KPIs that are on the screen here. So climate neutrality by 2050, the greenhouse gases, all of that. And we also know what role we play in the transport sector. And that is why I also appreciate the panel here a bit, because it's not just about the railway, it's about the complete set of mobility modes that are out there. And I think it was said rightfully also this morning, it's not just about doubling. Well, I might have a different opinion on the innovation part of it, and I will jump on that a bit later. Currently, 30% comes from the transport sector of the energy demand. And if we just continue growing as we grow, 60% more greenhouse gas emissions will come from it by 2050 if we don't change our travel behavior. And for that, it is not just about giving restrictions, it's about providing options. I think you said it this morning, it's about how many people do have access to transport. And I would like, and now I go a bit deeper, you're in Germany, so welcome to Germany for all of you that are not living here. And I wanted to come with this example to show you a bit why I have my doubts that easily, without innovation, we can double transport. That was said this morning. But I do think it's quite a challenging task if you look at what is out there. And I will take you now on a small journey into a technical aspect, which is called an interlocking. An interlocking is that piece of equipment that sets a route in a safe way. In Germany, more than 3,500 interlockings are out there, of which more than 50% are more than 70 years old. So you see a number of pictures down there of what is out there when you take a train here in Germany. These are the interlockings that set your routes. You see the mechanical interlockings, you see the relay interlockings. And if you ask yourself and read the newspapers these days saying, well, where does all this punctuality come from? A part of that is also what is out there. And just imagine keeping that alive, how difficult it is, not just on the parts that you still need to get, also on the resources, on the people that you need to have to operate it. How easy do you think it is to go to a university and tell the students, well, join our company, you will learn about beautiful relays? They will say, well, I rather program in Java or whatever is out there. So it's something that is quite a challenge. And the planned modal shift that we're talking about is really, really difficult if we don't go into innovation. That is why I'm a bit controversial saying we need innovation to truly change something there. And that is why digitalization is a key. And I will go into 3 different aspects here, not very long, but just to give you an example, on the rail infrastructure, on the rail services, but also on the software services that we also talked about earlier about how to attract passengers. So on the infrastructure, you've seen all these nice pictures of what is out there, but there are a lot of possibilities to digitize the railway and then also to provide additional services. Automatic train operation is one of it, where you can save up to 30% of energy and get trains much, much closer to each other. So you increase capacity on existing rails, especially in Europe, but also in many other places around the world. You cannot just build new lines. Space is not there. Think about Switzerland. There are mountains. You cannot build new lines. You need to bring more capacity onto the rails. And we're doing that. Some examples are in Norway, or if you have the chance to visit Hamburg, you will find the first ever automatic train operation over ETCS, which is running in Hamburg on the S-Bahn train. Going to raise services, it's also to keep your trains running and not just look into your handbook saying, well, after that 1,000 kilometers, I need to bring the trains back. You need to understand how healthy are your trains, how healthy is your system, and you bring them into the depots whenever they need to be repaired, not just by the book, but when there is a need. And by that, you can keep trains much more out there. You can keep the capacity that is out there, and with that, certainly reduce cost, but also increase capacity. And we call that 100% availability with what we have with Railigent Insight. Just to give you a data point there again, Thameslink, which is a line in London, generates about 9 million data points a week. 9 million data points, and all of that we're analyzing to see, do the trains need some service or don't they need some service? And then we come to the third part, the third pillar of the whole infrastructure, which is the software to attract people, but also to provide means for the operators to control your network much better. In Germany, we're talking about the Deutschlandtakt, about running trains every hour on routes. And if you get into that, you find out how difficult it is to control the whole network. If you want to insert a cargo train, it's not easy. You need to calculate and what will it mean. So the digitalization also on that side for the operators is one part of it. And the other side of it is certainly also to provide more attractive services for the passengers. We're currently executing in Spain something which is called Renfe as a Service, that will connect 27 cities, not just the backbones, like you said, but also the modes that you have in the cities to provide a true end-to-end journey for the passengers. And Renfe, as operator, has the estimation that they will have 1.8 million more trips in the next 5 years. So it's also a financial benefit that comes with it. Last but not least, it's not just about the infrastructure, it's certainly about also the rolling stock that is out there. About 40% of the railway lines in Europe are not yet electrified. Here in Germany, in the coalition contract of the new government, the ambition is by 2030 to electrify 75%. But also there, that is quite a challenge. And you see, we will not get there that all lines will be electrified. So you need to have alternatives which are not per se diesel trains, but other modes of transports. And certainly battery and hydrogen trains can help replacing those diesels. We all understand it's not just about the train itself. The first ones are out there, they are running, which is a great success, but it's about the complete infrastructure and everybody working together to provide then also the fueling, the green hydrogen, all of that, what comes together. So with that, I'm ending my presentation here, looking forward to the discussion. I welcome all of you at the InnoTrans. If you have the chance, we're looking forward so much to the InnoTrans after 4 years to meet in person again and showcase all these innovations in reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrés, for your presentation. Effectively, if I look at your presentation, first of all, one of the reasons why Siemens is one of the founding members of the Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking Previous Shift to Rail is because, as you can see from the presentation of Andrés, we are completely aligned on the objective we want to achieve. The second element of his presentation is that in presenting the infrastructure, he's presenting all about digital and automation in terms of infrastructure. And I think is something that will be a key element of all the discussion we'll have and also link with the energy security. I have only 2 comments. The first one, I don't want to contradict you, but in India, they just opened 1 week ago a line connecting New Delhi and another town, I don't remember the name, 200 kilometers away, on ETCS line with ATO over ETCS on LTE and fully digitalized. So we have quite big competitors. It was done by one of our European supply industry. I will not mention which one. But to say the competition is there, and I think it's important that we have this competition because it's also helping us to accelerate. On the interlockings, also a second comment, I was in one of the major cities in Europe, and it was a room like this, and we were controlling a couple of lines from there. And it looks perfect. It was digital with screen and something like this, but there was a series of cupboard behind, and I asked, what is cupboard? And one person opened was a relay. And they said to me, these are absolutely fundamental, and they will continue to live for the next 100 years. And they said, we don't trust digital. So this was a quite interesting comment. And once again, one of the major major cities in Europe and lines, while on the other room there was a full digital autonomous line working perfectly. So these are the reality that and why are important? Because once again, they will shape the type of service we can offer to the clients. As you said, how we can fit more trains on the same network, how we can fit more mobility and transport in the same network. Now we go to a different type of mode of transport that is not here. They are working on it, and we have with us Andrés de León online, is the CEO of Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. Andrés, which is your views about energy supply, how Hyperloop will contribute to reduce the consumption of energy that André talked about before, increasing the communication?
Well, first of all, thank you, Carlo, for your question, and thank you for having me here. We, in Hyperloop TT, we thought from the beginning, that energy consumption was a key point of the elements, to make a system that could be sustainable. For us, when we developed sorry, I'm going to start my video because they are asking me, but I think that it's not working very well, so I don't know if it's a good idea. But anyway, so we thought that for us, we developed the Hyperloop based on 3 pillars. As our colleagues were talking before, passenger experience, improving drastically passenger experience, creating a system that was economically viable and that doesn't rely on public subsidies, and that is also part of how our contribution to sustainability. And finally, and the most important, developing a system that was sustainable. So we work very hard in reducing the consumption of energy, and on top of that, we develop a system where we put solar panels on top of all the core infrastructure, and we base all the energy consumption having a positive balance based on solar panels. So basically, we could say that from the point of view of operations, of course, other thing is the construction and all that, but from the point of view of operations, we can help not only with reduction in the carbon emissions, but also securing our own energy for developing the system. And I think that that's something that we need to think more and more. How do we, first of all, reduce the consumption? That's a key point, key element. The second, in this environment, that we are seeing that we have an energy crisis coming, how we can use our actual infrastructure to generate the energy that we also need. And that was basically what we did from the beginning.
Thank you, Andrés, for your views about Hyperloop. We'll come back to it because I have some questions that also are linked to the point that before François mentioned about passenger and equity, but we'll come back to you later on. We have with us also Karen Vancluysen from the POLIS, and I would like to have the views of Karen because she brings inside a different type of perspective that is the urban environment perspective. Karen, I see you online, so which is your views and how you think we can ensure that the public transport and the urban transport will benefit for the necessary secure energy to ensure connectivity of people?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. When we talk about the energy angle in particular, what I would like to highlight is that when we talk about electromobility, it will be important in the urban environment and in moving forward in terms of reaching climate satisfaction you get when you look at the climate discussions surrounding the COP, for example, as if electrification is going to solve everything. And there I would really like to echo what François said earlier, that when we talk about the urban environment, the number one priority is really a radical modal shift away from the private car in our cities. And even if we're going to electrify the cars that we still have in our urban cores, it's not going to solve the other challenges that our cities are facing, because it's not just about climate, it's also about the need to reduce congestion, the need to improve safety, which is still a major challenge as well, and overall the need to improve quality of life in our cities for living, and giving the streets back to the people, basically, so that we have cities for people instead of cities for cars. So what is important to stress as well when we do talk about electromobility is that we have to approach it in a multimodal way, and that indeed implies electrifying taxi fleets, such as public transport fleets, but also urban fringe fleets, for example, so not just replacing the current cars with electric cars. And there's also a massive untapped potential still when we talk about the e-bike in particular. The e-bike is extending the typical 5-kilometer range of cycling way beyond that limit, and it will also be an important tool in reducing the adverse impact of incoming commuting traffic, for example. If we can replace next to public transport, obviously, some of the trips with e-bike trips, some of the car trips, and especially if that goes hand in hand with dedicated infrastructure such as supercycle highways, which are long-distance infrastructure for cycling. So that backbone of active travel and public transport needs to be safeguarded hand in hand with electrification, yes, but especially with this modal shift that both François and I have mentioned.
Thank you, Karen, for your intervention. Now, Rafael, we let you wait a long time now. You have the chance also, you are the last of this first round. I think aviation is under quite a lot of pressure also in terms of not only sustainability, generally speaking, but also the securing energy supply and fossil fuel, especially with the current Ukrainian crisis. Would you like to share your views about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, well, thank you for inviting me here. This is really a great opportunity to be here. I am listening carefully and very interesting. I think we clearly see that we all share this the challenge of global warming, obviously, and the global issue that we are dealing with. And, you know, the topics that we have all mentioned are of global nature. They're not necessarily of regional nature, which is something for us, we believe, that unifies us in this challenge, I would say. I think transportation as a whole, I think, André, you mentioned the global impact of transportation overall. In terms of environment, and that means that we all have to work together in a global form to be able to tackle this, right? Because this is the discussion we're having here, I think, are very much interdependent, I would say. There is obviously, as you know, a lot of misperceptions out there as well that we need to address, because if we focus on the customer as well, to be able to, you know, even using just the example given about the use of cars, for example, right? I mean, and things like that. So the challenge is to reduce our environmental footprint, and I think we have a very common agenda there. We often also talk about, you know, the more traditional means of transport, maritime, air, road, and rail. But we just heard from Andrés, for example, on the Hyperloop. I think these are very important things. I mean, we all talked about somewhat about innovation. In Hyperloop it's a great initiative, I think, that has a very important, great potential actually as well. In the same line, I would say, you know, we're still seeing the development of drones, right? And that's another very important element. And we are expecting actually to see in 2024 in the Summer Olympics in Paris to be able to use taxis, drone taxis, right? So I think, again, it's linked to technology and innovation. I think that was also a common theme that we have. Apologies for this. I think I have water here, thanks. So I think it's important that that the whole transport ecosystem works collectively and collaborative in this challenge, and focusing together at the same time that obviously everyone has to be focusing on its environmental sustainability plans, which everybody highlighted as just now. In terms of the aviation industry, in last year, the industry came together and agreed to a fly net zero strategy by 2050, right? That strategy has an ambitious, apologies again, an ambitious target. We came with a plan. The plan depends a lot, obviously, and this is one plan. Again, there are many things that could change, but 65% of it relies on sustainable aviation fuels, right? And that includes synthetic fuels as well, right? 13% relies on investment in new aircraft technology. 3% is in improvements in infrastructure and operational efficiencies, and 19% of approved offsets, and including carbon capture, right? Which also requires important improvements in technology, right? And in some cases, there are technologies that today that exist already today, which we could use, and there are others that need to be developed, funded, and incentivized. I think we all spoke about technology and in that regard. In the case of SAF, we believe that has to be a very high priority, because obviously there is no alternative ways, and many of you are coming here not from Europe, from far away, that there is no way that you're going to be able to get here by many alternative means, by intercontinental flying, which is still requires fuel for quite a while. So SAF is a high priority. Just to give you an idea, I think not long ago, a few days ago or something, the CEO of Lufthansa was saying that the whole world production of SAF will be sufficient to power Lufthansa for 1 week, right? So this clearly shows that there is a huge gap if we are actually to be able to fly more sustainably, which it's necessary to be able to get to 2050 at one point in net zero, right? So this requires, I would say, enhanced cooperations. I think it was said already, François, you highlighted in your graph the interdependency of all the modes of transport and the need to, let's say, drive efficiencies. I would say we also need to be conscious about the things that we can do today. As I said before, there are certain technologies that are available, and Carlo, you know very well the still not realized single European sky strategy in Europe. Single European sky, the integration of the whole ATM system in Europe is a very important thing that we have full, I mean, you're very aware of it. The technology that we have is here, right? And that will mean over 10% of CO2 emissions to be saved, right? And that is still not being implemented due to more, let's say, political or nationalistic views in general, right? So I would say we have to assume, states and us, I would say we have to assume a leadership position. We have to embrace technology. We have to embrace innovation. We have to look at this holistically, as I think many highlighted, from a community perspective, but also from a global perspective, because if we are, as François, you mentioned, if the key focus should be the customer, right, then we need to look at it more on the wider spectrum, I would say. And again, thank you very much for having this opportunity. I think it's very interesting for me to listen as well to the views here. Thanks.
Thank you, Rafael, for your intervention. I would like to go back to what you just said, because effectively you summarized, I think, what all of you have indicated. The attention to technology, the attention to sustainability, the attention to the secure energy. François, you brought up one of the key elements that also Karen took later on, is how we induce the behavioral changes in people to favor, I would say, transport that is not the private car. Not talk about public transport, but talk about the alternative to the private car. Today, in Europe, still we have the majority of journeys are done by the private car, and percentages that are quite important. And Andrés said before, mobility will increase, it will not reduce, and we don't want to. I think the worst scenario we had was the pandemic, when we are locked down in our small garden, and we are missing this. So how we can make this change happening? And maybe I will ask also the other after to intervene on it.
Well, that's, from my point of view, the major challenge, because today we have to face in fact, a quite simple reality. The whole transport paradigm is dedicated to car. Basically, road is the backbone of mobility today. That's a reality. That's, let's say, a systemic reality. The second one is an individual one. For all of us, well, myself, I have the opportunity to live in Paris with an excellent public transport network, so I have no cars. But for most of people, cars is what economists say a stranded cost. You have a car, so you have to use it anyway. And that's the solution you will choose. So what we have to do is really to change the paradigm, and we have to change the paradigm under a constraint. We have 10 years. We all know that, because we have all seen the last IPCC report. We have to curb the emission by 27% if we want only to reach the 2% target of the Paris Agreement. So that means that we have to act fast. So from my point of view, there are two basic issues. First of all, we have to increase capacity globally on our public transport network. That goes for rail, but also for metros and so on. And that's digitalization. I will not repeat what was said by Siemens, but we have together to accelerate on digitalization. And I think what is very important is that we are working hand in hand, manufacturers and operators, to make this digitalization something that is both efficient and cost effective. The second very important idea, and that's what Karen said, when you are managing or when you are the responsibility of the transport in the big city, you are confronted with a lot of questions, not only emission, but public space occupation, quality of life, safety, security, and so on. So then you have the feeling that, well, the solutions are at hand, but what you need is indeed to have this policy towards modal shift as a central political objective. And then, well, sorry to say that, but there is some politics here. You need to have a political objective. Well, if you see in Europe the countries that have been successful in having a large modal share for rail and public transport, well, I will cite two, Austria and Switzerland. Both of them, they have a central political objective, which is modal shift. That's into, in Switzerland, that many referendum on the question. I was living in Switzerland for 6 years, and I think I saw one, and it was the fourth they did on this very question. And all people agreed to continue into this direction. So we have to have people with us. Well, the customers, obviously. Well, UIC, we are an association of operators, so we need to think first to the customer. But we have to also to think to the customer and to have a vision. That's what we try to do within UIC with our Vision 2030. A vision that is shared among all the actors, public, all the public transport actors, to give a picture that is a desirable picture, and then to have the policies implemented. Well, it's quite ambitious, but I think that's the only possibility that we have to make this happening. And that will be my last comment. We have to be serious. But, well, luckily, rail and public transport, we are serious people. We said, I think 4 years ago, we will have ATO first in rail. ATO is there. We did it. And I think when we say that we will do something, we are actually doing it. And I think that's a value that needs to be underlined. Thank you.
Thank you, François. Yes, I was on a train that was testing ATO GR2 over ETCS in a place where there was no ERTMS, and using different type of technologies. It was a couple of weeks ago, Saturday night, I spent the night on this train, and I think it was important, especially another aspect that is sometimes underestimated, is the other-way relation that is not the human-machine relation, but is the machine-human, so how the person take over from the machine. But to go back to your point, to bring back in the discussion Karen, because she mentioned also, you heard François about how to convince people to leave the private car. How, from the urban perspective, from the police perspective, Karen, you think we can join forces to compete with the private car?
Yes, I think really we need to make sure that all of the different sustainable alternatives that we have available today, that they come together and indeed, as you say, join forces to compete with the private car. And that means we need to become more multimodal and we need to become more intermodal. And at the same time, we do have to realize that monomodality is way easier for people. It's more complicated to be multimodal and to combine different alternatives which are sustainable. That's why we have to make sure that that experience becomes as seamless as possible for the user, for the customer. So that means indeed, as François said, that we need to have that customer experience at heart and take that into consideration. The challenge for politicians at the same time is that they need to reconcile the user-centric view with what the city as a whole needs. And what an individual wants and needs and what the city as a whole needs is not necessarily aligned or reconciled. And that's the ongoing political challenge as well. Now, coming back to this need for multimodality and intermodality, there we need physical integration on the ground. So interchanges, mobility hubs, where the different modes come together and can be easily combined so that you can easily switch from one mode to the next. You arrive by train and you take a shared bike, for example, which is available at the station. But also even on the neighborhood level, you have smaller mobility hubs where you can also pick up shared modes after having used public transport. But we also need those modes to be integrated on a digital level. Digitalization was also mentioned before, and then we're talking about integrated ticketing, and we're also talking about mobility as a service, of course, where you have all the modes coming together in a digital environment, where you can look for the modes, you can book them, and you can pay for them in an integrated way. We have been talking also about the need for innovation and the need to embrace innovation, but I would like to add to that we also need to regulate innovation, because all these innovations and new technologies come with big promises, and they all, say they're going to solve the challenges that we are discussing here. But if there is no public sector oversight, sometimes we will see that not sustainability, but commercial interests are going to be predominant. And I think mobility as a service is a perfect example of that. Because if you leave mass and the rollout of mass, because we talk about it a lot, but it's not being deployed to a very high extent just yet. But if we leave that to the commercial sector alone, we will see that those modes that are going to be pushed towards the user will not necessarily be the most sustainable ones, but might be the ones that generate revenue for a commercial mass provider. And we already see trends today that point in that direction. If we ask for a walking route on Google Maps, for example, we see that Google Maps is trying to nudge the user towards an e-scooter. Now, this is not the kind of model shift that cities are looking for. We don't want pedestrians to go onto e-scooters. We want car drivers to get onto e-scooters. That's the kind of model shift we want. So this is something we need to regulate and where we need public sector oversight. Same for new mobility services. We want them to fill the gaps that cannot be filled by mass transit, but we don't want them to undermine public transport. Just referring to the role of ride-hailing, for example, Uber-type services, that we don't want to replace public transport, but we rather want them to complement public transport. And that, again, will require public sector oversight. So that's how I see we need to move forward towards multimodality and intermodality.
Thank you, Karen. We go to Andrés, because Andrés, effectively, when I was talking one of the first time with some of the promoters of Hyperloop, when I was asking the question that we just asked and François put on the table, how we convince people is there a market for Hyperloop? I was told, yeah, we will create the market for Hyperloop. We will create the need for people to use Hyperloop. how you see the Hyperloop coming to a reality, and how you think Hyperloop, or do you have evidence on how much is the impact in terms of carbon emission reduction in the feasibility studies that you have done? So how you are combining the attractiveness towards the clients, and how do you combine it with the sustainability that Hyperloop is expected to provide?
Well, first of all, I really believe that there is a market for it. It's not that we need to create the market. The market is there. And it's very simple and very easy. No? Land mass transportation has a challenge. When you want to travel from Madrid to Barcelona, you take the AVE, you take the high-speed rail, because it's simple, it's convenient. You go from city center to city center, and you use 2.5 hours, 3 hours of your time. But when you are going to travel from Madrid to Paris, nobody's going to take the train. And that's a problem. That's a problem. There is a limitation right now on the demand, because people doesn't want to stay 5 hours, 6 hours in a train. Barcelona-Sevilla is there. You continue having a lot of flights. No? So there is a big opportunity and a big demand, to cover long distance, continental long distance for the Hyperloop, that right now is not being covered by any other mode of land mass transportation, according to the demand of the people, because it's reduced drastically. So that's the first thing. So the market is there, we just need to address it, okay? And we just need to. Regarding how Hyperloop helps to solve this question of carbon emissions, and again, I want to talk about carbon emissions, but I want to talk also about energy security. How do you secure your energy? I think that I was explaining before. Our system, because we are in a closed environment, we reduce drastically the energy consumption coming from aerodynamics. And also we have a passive magnetic levitation system that you don't need to electrify the track. So at the end of the day, we have a very, very low energy consumption. In addition to that, and on top of that, we have solar panels on top. So in all the studies that we have done, we reduce drastically the carbon emissions, basically because from the point of view of operations, Hyperloop is net zero in carbon emissions. In the feasibility study that we did in Great Lakes to connect Cleveland, Chicago, Pittsburgh, we could reduce the carbon emissions by 143 million tons in 25 years. And this is a feasibility study that has been done with independent consultants, has been reviewed by the public authority, and it's a feasibility study that has a lot of credibility, or has generated a lot of credibility in the US. So trying to summarize what I have said, first of all, the demand is there. Hyperloop is not going to solve all the problems of transportation, or maybe it's not even a good solution for all the possibilities, but it's one very good solution for a lot of business cases that make sense, and that we need to think. And we cannot only think in passengers, we need to think in passengers, but we also need to think in freight, in all the trucks that we have in the roads. Okay? So our vision, is to be part of this ecosystem, fully connected and with a seamless experience with all the other modes of transportation, and to help, to arrive on this road to decarbonization. That's basically what.
Thank you, Andrés. Rafael, Andrés spoke about multimodality being part of one ecosystem that is the mobility and transport. You mentioned all the activity that you are doing from the aviation perspective in terms of technology, in terms of operation, in terms of service and this. And François before already started introducing the question of financing. Who is paying for it? and I think we see from the societal point of view that the attention to sustainability is there, but we saw also immediately the lack of attention that came once the oil crisis started with the current situation in Ukraine and so on and so on. How you think we will be able to make the transition in such critical composition, especially for aviation that, as you said, there is a lot of elements that are on the table, from technology, from investments from operation, and as you said, single sky in Europe, but not only, because from the aviation you have the global dimension, so you can also bring inside your global view about it.
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, I believe that obviously we are, I mean, we have to start finding, first of all, again, this type of discussions where we're integrating and looking into what is the most convenient way to, right? Which we are not necessarily, right? We have to evaluate that. I think, Carlo, you and I had a previous discussion where I was giving the example of Valencia to Madrid, where most of us ride in the high-speed train, but at the same time, there is a point-to-point. It's a point-to-point. There is a need for a big connecting traffic that goes to Latin America. I was talking to the operators from the train to the airlines there, and the key is that most people are going through train. A few are needing still to be connecting through, and therefore we have a lot of homework to do to be able to, what it was said there in the customer view, how do we streamline and be able to interconnect efficiently and effectively. As I think in that sense, we have been seeing, I guess, in a way, aviation and rail to be competitors. I would say this is something we need to, and not only, by the way, because you are talking about cars, you're talking about trucks and things like that. I think we have to look at it as complementary. We have to look at it as a collaborative effort because the requirements that we have on energy are so high that we're not going to be able to do it. Now, in terms of how do we finance that, obviously, and we have said, well, for sure we don't agree that we finance, that we are, we regulate and tax to penalize travel, let's say, and I'm not talking about air travel in general. We need to invest in we need to innovate. I think Andrés highlighted the special need of innovation here if we're going to get out of this or be able to achieve the net zero by 2050 objective. So the investment in innovation is very much needed. Therefore, the incentives need to be massive, and they need to come, obviously, from private sector, but at the same time, at state level. I mean, we have seen what has happened now with the crisis, the energy crisis we have here in Europe, right? Where, we have, in the past, invested heavily and subsidized solar and wind power, for example. And now, and I live in Spain, and you can see that is obviously, let's say, helping in the sense of, well, helping now they are changing the regulated price is an issue, but officially the production of solar and wind has helped, but it was built through heavy investment in innovation and technology, right? So I think we need to be conscious about it when I talk about SAF, for example, right? We don't have the right set of incentive when we talk about SAF. We don't even have, when we talk about how to, get out of either buy electric cars or get out of cars, we don't have the right sort of incentive. When we talk about the airline side, the air transport side, mostly the discussions are in terms of penalizing air travel, right? Versus how do we bring efficiency into the interconnectivity that we have? How do we bring, the passenger experience? Again, it's always in our speeches, right? How do we bring the passenger, how do we make it simple so again, this is a moment where we need to incentivize the interconnectivity, I would say, facilitate from the customer side this ability to connect. And we have to remember, again, we're in Europe here, right? And Europe is actually one of the best connected regions that you have, and it's dependent on this for its success. So I think to preserve that, again, this requires a lot of incentives and financing as well from governments, not just from the private sector, I would say.
Thank you. Well, this will be one of the major, effectively, I think with the Union Recovery Fund that was being put on the table, We have 700 billion euros of resources to be used in short term, and we have two ways to use. We use for expenditure or we use for investments. I think the answer should be on investments. And you called in, André, on the technological point of view. We heard also Karen saying, be careful because if we leave technology and innovation open without the correct public oversight, we risk to move to one monopoly, maybe as a public service provider, to a digital monopoly or some things. What do you have seen as the major technology changes and innovation changes in the last 20 years in rail? And which are you think the future changes that we need to introduce to achieve this transition to sustainable mobility, so to offer new services to people to come on board of public transport, whatever it will be the form?
Thank you. I do think there has been a significant development in rail in the past years. If you look at where rail was maybe 20 years ago, it was like, well, somewhere in the corner. Some people use it, but it's much more sexy to have cars. Nowadays, I think especially in Europe, train has become so attractive that you feel like, how can I use public transport? You know, this kind of thought, is it comfortable? Can I use public transport? I think everybody understands how easy it is to take Madrid-Barcelona. I think that was a good example. Here in Germany, it's Munich-Berlin, if you want to use that. So these kind of developments are there, which is great. I've been taking a number of times the train from London to Paris, which is so comfortable if you want to travel in a real fast but also sustainable way. So on that part, I think a lot has happened. I think also the renaissance of overnight trains, the 10T program, the Trans-European corridors that we are pushing through, that is exactly the right thing that we have to do to attract people. We've seen in Austria the 365 euros ticket that you can buy. Now the next challenges are coming because people buying it and want to take the trains. But it's good that we're getting into this challenge, because only then we can take the next challenge. I think the 9 for 90 was mentioned this morning. It will come with more challenges, but it's good to have then the next challenge because you're attracting people to use it. I think you said it rightfully, it's not about penalizing or restrictions, it's about attracting people, and I think that is the right way to do. And this means of combining modes of transport. In France, the development that short distance flights are being stopped, but you can take the train. Same happened here in Germany from Berlin to Munich. But on the other hand, if something is not attractive, it will not work. I was on a panel discussion with the Lufthansa CEO, and he said, well, you know what? I still need to have my plane from Nuremberg to Munich, which is just very, very short distance. But if I don't provide that, if the people have to take a train from Nuremberg to Munich city center and then taking the S-Bahn train out, it takes them ages. They will rather take a plane to Amsterdam and take the connecting flight from there. And that, I think, is a good example about how you need to attract people and giving them the options to use sustainable transport, and that balance has to be given. Now, looking into the future, I think you've seen in the pictures that I showed, there is still a lot to do out there. I mean, sometimes I feel we are already talking about the next level. We're talking about mobility as a service. We're talking about all of these kind of things. And if I look at what is still out there as old technology, there's a lot to do still on that kind of thing. But still, I truly believe that mobility as a service and all these services are extremely important. And I do understand also when you talk about a monopoly or about commercial aspects that could lead it into a different direction, saying, well, if I take Google, it brings me to a scooter. I'm quite a fan of what, for example, the Netherlands and Spain has been doing, where public entities came together saying we need to have a common backbone, and then we give a front end to a city or a bike operator or whatever, a scooter, whoever is out there, but we provide the backbone. And Rivière in the Netherlands has been doing it. As I said, Renfe has been doing it. I don't think it is then a monopoly. It is a backbone that can be used, because what you can see, on the contrary, if you don't provide that, is something that every city wants their own little app. And then in every city, I mean, I have, I think 5 apps only for Berlin on my phone, for this scooter and that bike, and then you have the metro, and then you have the Deutsche Bahn and all of that. And that can also not be if you say, well, every operator can have their own play thing. I do think every operator needs to have an identity. but there needs to be a common layer where open interfaces are being provided that you can exchange data. And if you think that even further to planes, to car sharing, to the Ubers of this world, then you're coming really to a state where you can attract people to take not just the shortest way, but for example, the most CO2 efficient way that you can then choose in Google or whatever app you use.
Thank you. I've been in the US in January for the Transport Research Board conference, is the major conference. And definitely I saw a major change exactly in this type of direction. The discussion is not anymore about do we need to have sustainable mobility in transport, is that how we make it happen. And I think this is really the change that is coming at a global level. Thank you for your intervention. Before going maybe to the conclusion, because the time is we are reaching the end of the session. Any question from the public? I don't see any hands raised. Yeah, but sorry, please. I don't know if you need a microphone or, yeah, someone will come with a microphone also for the colleagues that are online so they can. It's here, in front line here, in first line.
I can shout out, sure. All of you have been talking about digitalisation and also about customer experience. Do you think that there's a section of the community that is just disenfranchised by not having access to that technology? Areas of multiple deprivation, the areas where we need to get transport working differently. Would anyone comment on that?
Rafael, maybe first and after François.
Well, I think it's a very, very important question, because I think we're discussing here, and many of the examples we have given are from well-connected Europe, let's say, right? And obviously you're totally right in that sense. I would say there are a few, in my view, well, first of all, I would say when we look at this, we need to look at globally, right? I mean, I think, Andrés, you highlighted we need to have common standards, we need to have common bases. So we need to stop looking at this, I would say, nationally, and it has to be globally, right? And if you look at it and then see what has happened, for example, with banking in certain countries in Africa or Latin America, where a lot of the banking is done in mobile phones, right? So in a very economical way, because they jump straight to that instead of whatever intermediate point. So I would say there is a very important opportunity if we do look at this globally and we develop systems that are globally accessible to people through technology that today is relatively accessible. Again, you talked about obviously very deprived conditions. I cannot say everyone, but we have seen the success of banking in Africa and Latin America, for example, where they can basically do everything through the phone, right? That's one. But in aviation, we obviously, as we know, we have a global standards, right? And I think what we're talking about integrating systems now, this is something, at least from my aviation background, is that it could help in the discussion that we stop discussing more nationally and we look at it more globally, because that is what requires to integrate everything, right? That is what requires to be able to have a seamless passenger experience and be able to opt for the most efficient way of traveling. And I have many examples where I landed in an airport and tried to take a train, but it's not always easy, right? And I am a very, let's say, well-prepared traveler, right? So you can imagine, so I would say, again, technology can be made accessible. There are some best practices in other sectors. We should bring it in our, the transport sector, I would say.
Thank you, Rafael. François, I saw that you wanted to intervene and also provide your views.
Yes, well, I quite agree about what is to be done in technical terms, but I think in more, let's say, practical terms, I think what we have to aim for is to make technology disappearing. Let's make myself clear. Well, there is this question of people disaffiliated that can also be disaffiliated because they are not familiar with technology. So we need a system where things are in a way self-explanatory. And I think we have very good record of that, well, for instance, in Switzerland, where they are in the process of interconnecting all the ticketing application using the rail application as a backbone. That means that you don't really see that from the user perspective. But what you can see is that, well, all the ticketing are integrated, and even the flow management, meaning that you are sure that you have a tram when you are going out of the suburban train that is arriving at one very precise hour. At some time, you don't really have to look to your iPhone or to look to anything. You just have to follow the flow. And that's what technology is able to do. I think I think that's an important point. If we want to have the thing successful, and I think the €9 ticket from Germany is really also a very good experimentation of that. Because if you have a global €9 ticket, you don't really have to bother what kind of application has been implemented, Nuremberg versus Berlin or whatever. But you just have to go on the platform, take the transportation, and then you will realize that what is important is indeed that the cadencing is fine, that you have really a collaboration between mode, and at the end of the day, that technology that it used to make that working at some point should disappear for the user.
Thank you. I can also bring my 2 cents of contribution. I've been working for the United Nations, as you know, from IFAD. And one of the issues that we have when we talk about this, we had an area in Central Asia that was rich of rural development herbs were created and something like this. Extremely valuable. All the industry of cosmetic and so on and so on needed it. Where was the problem? There was no road. It was not possible to transport them. So exactly as you said, if we are not bringing inside the correct way to connect the people, also in the most difficult, most deprived zone, we simply create disequality. And this is exactly what mobility and transport shall not do. And it goes back to the question that also Karen put on the table, is the public supervision of the transport and mobility, and how we can have the evolution of this. In the Europe's Rail program, we have activities. I can bring my also 2 cents of point of view on exactly how to address the connectivity of people to urban center from areas that are today not connected or risk not to be in the future connected. We have plenty of rail lines that are not anymore sustainable, and I think Andrés explained before, we are looking at automation, ATO, the service on demand, exactly to address this question. But will come the point of saying, do we have the resources to fund these type of things? Are only public services, or how we make them sustainable? Because we know that we'll have tension from the economic point of view that we see every moment going up and up. I don't know if you have any other question. A question there, please? If we can have, we have a couple of questions. Yeah, I don't know where is the microphone. Yeah, there. Oh, sorry.
Hello. I think one point is also very important, which is customer satisfaction at the moment. Yeah, it's good to have all these technologies and all the ideas, but at the moment you have no reliability on the time schedules, especially in Germany. Yeah, when a train is scheduled for 12 minutes without a stop between Hanover Airport and Hanover Railway main station, and it takes instead of 12 minutes, 32 minutes, and you lose the next train connection. Yeah, you will not attract people to switch to the railways when there is an opportunity to use taxis or Ubers or other things. And I think this is also important, that still customer focus, customer view is not on a level as it should be, and very often you can see a kind of monopoly way of thinking at some operators. And here I think a lot has to be done.
Well, thank you. I think it's more a comment than a question as such. Yeah, sure. But yes, absolutely. We know that we can do better. These are no doubts. I think the question of service is one attention. I know that, I don't know if, André, you want to comment, but I know that you are working also on solution in automation and digitalization, including really oriented to provide different type of services. to the clients.
Yeah, well, maybe I can also answer my other position as the head of the German Railway Association to that. And I think you've seen yesterday maybe that the CEO of the German Railway did a press conference, especially because of that situation. I think it is well understood, but it is also the result, especially here in Germany, sometimes even in Europe, of decades of non-investing. Now you can say, well, because now I cannot serve the passengers, do I want to abandon the railway, or do I accept that I'm going into a century of construction works? We all see that if we go along a highway, how many years a highway can be refurbished. We will need to get through that, and that belongs to the reality, to the honesty, to say, well, that is what will happen. Now, is there a lot to improve? Definitely. It's about passenger information, it's about the right connections, it's about service if something failed. So I don't want to wipe this away, but I do think that is the balance that needs to be found by modernizing Europe's railway and still being able to serve passengers in the best possible way. So that's a thin line.
I think also you mentioned something really important. You said, if I'm not mistaken in your slide, that 70% of the interlockings are reaching 50 years or are 50-year-old. The other way around. So, okay. So 50% are 70 years old. So this is also an opportunity. But I think what will be important, as you said, to recognize is also the fact that we need to be honest. This will have an impact for the service for a certain period of time. There is a transition. When the road network has been improved, it was not that it was so smooth, and I think we paid all the consequences. So I think it's important to recognize that this transition will have an impact. And the same for aviation, as Rafael said, the single European sky is not there. We are not really benefiting, although we are working since 2005, before I just joined Cesar, on this, and still we have some limitation from this point of view. So I think this is so the direction for improvement will require for sure a transition process. But I think the communication to the clients will be a fundamental aspect, and the honesty to the clients will be a fundamental aspect. I saw there was another colleague, sorry for before, but please go ahead.
No problem, thank you. I just want to comment on the discussion you had when shifting from plane to train. To give you an example, from a heavy train user, I'm thinking not the only one in the room. Yesterday I took a train from Lausanne, Switzerland to Berlin. Crazy, some might say it took me 9 hours. It was okay, perfect in Switzerland, all in time. An issue in Germany, of course, 1 hour delay due to construction works. We all know this. But it was all right, because I could work there, really. All the time was stable Wi-Fi connection, so that is okay. I was also thinking about taking a flight, but you would have to no direct flights from Geneva, so you have to go to Basel, change over to Frankfurt. So it would take me also like 4 or 5 hours. So I think there is some possibility to also take a train, even if it takes longer, if let's say, the circumstances are right. You know. And for another one, a good example, though this goes more now to leisure travels. If we see there are good connections now coming from Germany, Western Germany, for instance, Cologne. If you go to Côte d'Azur, even they improved this, so you could bring this down to 6 or 7 hours. The issue is you have to change, and sometimes you have like a break or a changeover of more than an hour. So I think if you really want to tackle these let's say, mid-length flights, you really have to have a proper service, a proper offer, no long delays in any train station. Change in Paris train stations, that's a mess, of course. And last comment, of course, make it bookable. I mean, I want to book it, no possible. Online, you go there, you have to call or go to the counter because they say, sorry, we can't give you a price. And if you get a price, it might be 200, 300 euros, whereas I get with a low-cost carrier 50 or 60 euros. So I think that's the decisions everyone takes into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, yeah, we have a comment, but I think, well, the first comment is that also today we can connect Europe by rail, and there is really an opportunity to assess how to make the modal shift. François.
That's a very interesting comment, 2 ways actually. First of all, you insist about how we can interconnect the different lines. And that's true that we don't have a European way of thinking the hubs, the stations. And that's something UIC is very active on. We have a special working group on stations, and you will be, I think, amazed to see that that's a global concern. And we are speaking with Japanese, with Chinese, with, Indian a little bit also. And really, the question, if we take the vocabulary of data network, that's a node. If you look to the European regulation, there is no thinking about the nodes of the network. So we need to think together the nodes. We need to think the interconnection. And indeed, if you win 1 hour in the interconnection, it's a very cheap way to shorten the journey without heavily investing. The second question is integrated ticketing, and that we are working indeed within UIC on a new data model, which is called OSDM, Open Share and Data, and Open Sales and Distribution Model, where we are trying to integrate from public transport, rail, and aviation. So that's really something we need absolutely to develop. And perhaps a very last comment about the question of investment. We know that there are framing investments that we need to do for upgrading the level of interconnection of the European network. And I will insist, because I insisted, but I will insist again, time is the issue. We are not really speaking about 2050, because by 2050 we have a relatively clear prospect that we will be able to decarbonize. The question is 2030, and that's what the IPCC report repeatedly said. We need to have a dramatic drop into the emission by 2030. And that is about modal shift, because if you shift 10% of the traffic to rail by 2030, which is possible with some heavy investment, then you will have a drop of the emission on the transport side about 8 to 9%, depending on the energy mix. So that's really what we have to do, and to do fast. And well, that's from my point of view the main question. And to be really fast here again, the main question is that today we have no financing scheme for modal shift. And that is really, from my point of view, a key question that we should have in mind, everyone around the table.
Thank you, François. You already took the time for your conclusion, but I would like to ask all the speakers to give a final remark, and maybe taking your point, François, because you said it, is which are the priorities that you have from in your perspective to achieve the target of 2030 and not 2050? Clearly, the 2030 will be the starting point of a major change, but how we can achieve 2030? Let me start with Karen, if I may.
Yes, I think we've been discussing innovation, we've been discussing incentives, but what we also should be discussing, if we really want to make that step change, is not just the carrots, but also the sticks. And what we really need to do is finally internalize the external cost of polluting car traffic to society, because we are still massively subsidizing car traffic, whereas it's polluting, whereas it's creating an economic cost in terms of congestion, whereas it's taking up space as well. So we are at that stage where we can no longer afford this, and we see that cities are increasingly also introducing pricing measures, whether it's low or zero emission zones, whether it's congestion charges or parking management, and that really is the way forward, despite the fact that it's a politically very sensitive measure. It's not something that is embraced or popular by citizens, but it's very necessary, and those incomes need to be reinvested in public transport, in sustainable mobility alternatives. At the same time, we have to make sure that the transition is just and inclusive, but we also have to move away from the false narrative that such pricing measures will hit those which are already the most vulnerable. Actually, those people usually don't even own a car, but are exposed to the highest numbers of air and noise pollution. So that would be my...
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Andrés, I know that maybe one of your priorities will be to bring Hyperloop in operation by 2030. Andrés, which are your priorities?
Well, our priority is to bring it in operation even sooner than 2030. But again, for me, there is not a silver bullet, okay? There is not only one solution, but it's very clear that at the same time that we are working in continuous improvement and we are trying also cannot forget about the exponentiality of radical improvement. Okay, there are solutions that we have been working on that in 7 years we are ready to build. We just need contracts. You know, we don't need subsidies, we don't need grants, we don't need things like that. We need contracts. And we need to think also in that kind of mentality. You know? And I always put the example of SpaceX. You know? SpaceX has developed all their technology just because they have contracts from NASA. That's all. You know? And you know, and I think that it's time also for the industry to understand that there are, you know, again, we need to continue working together because Hyperloop is not going to be the solution for everything. We'll continue having planes, we'll continue having trains, we'll continue, you know. But definitely, you know, we also need to invest some part of the budget in being sure that we can move fast enough. Because if we don't move fast, especially, you know, in some of the countries, others will do it, you know, and they will take the technology lead on these kind of fields. So
thank you, Andrés.
that's basically my conclusion.
Thank you very much, Andrés, for your participation and your contribution. André, which are your priorities? Short.
Yeah, I will make it short, and we should be very bold in our decisions. We should be very fast in our decisions and then execute. Sometimes I have the feeling we're standing still at the starting point. We made a way and we're proud of what we did, but it has to be much faster and much bolder if we want to truly succeed. And we can only do that if we work all together. It's not just Europe needs to provide that and they need to provide that. It will only be successful if we do this jointly.
Thank you. I will keep these words in my mind when we will be evaluating the answer to the call proposal that I'm sure Siemens will be involved, because we have a short deadline in 4 years to deliver major changes that will pave the way for what you just mentioned. To conclude, maybe Rafael, which are the priorities from your perspective?
Well, I mean, reflecting on what we just listened to, and after 2 years of a pandemic where we have seen that an increase, I would say, political, environmental, and economic challenge that we are facing, we have also seen that the fragmentation approach that we have taken in the pandemic has not brought many good results, right? We've seen that. So in the discussions here, I think are quite aligned to, I would say, the priorities that we need to work, transport stakeholders need to work together, right? I mean, in a more holistic way, obviously using this technology to be able to bring it to the customer, and the customer meaning anyone. Again, here in Europe, we are very well connected, but we're not talking about Europe only, right? So I believe very much in the role of transport in bringing society, bringing, let's say, social benefits to society, which are very important, right? This connectivity, this ability to connect effectively, efficiently, cheaply, and sustainably. It's a very important priority to us as well. So I would say that we should work towards that, and at the same time maintain something very important to all of us, which is the freedom of movement. Because sometimes we talk about restricting. I think here is innovation and ways to maintain this freedom that has brought a lot of benefit at the same time. We shouldn't forget that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rafael. I think these words are really absolutely important. My takeaways is that as different actors in the mobility and transport, there is a clear understanding. There is the time to execute is now. It's not 2050, is now. We need to start it now. And we need to put the resources. We need to do it with equity, inclusiveness, and we didn't mention it because it was mentioned before by the other panel, but with the support of the workers. And I think is really what is making the difference, especially in a transition to a more sustainable society that should be not only from the energy point of view, but globally. And I go back also to the point of how we making sure it's inclusive, it's not dividing for this. And to conclude, only I will mention the fact about the ticketing. I know that for the rail operators that provided the support to help the people leaving Ukraine to come to Europe, the ticket was a piece of paper written Ukraine. I think this will be sufficient. Okay, I think it's a symbolic element of the fact of our mobility and transport can be unifying and be sustainable for everyone. Thank you very much. Please join me in a big applause to our panel. I would like to thank you, François, Andrés, Rafael, Karen, and Andrés for their participation. Back to you. Thank you.